call the honourable member for Solomon.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I rise today to speak to the Appropriations Bill and update the House on the electorate of Solomon and the solid progress that the Coalition Government is making for the people of Darwin and Palmerston. Mr Deputy Speaker, when this government was elected, we promised that we would stop the boats, and we have. For the people of the top end, the people smuggling activities were more than something we read about in the newspapers. It was something that we dealt with on a daily basis. Mr Deputy Speaker, you probably remember that one boat got within 13 kilometres of Bathurst Island and another one landed on Croker Island undetected. When the number of boats surged after Labor opened the gates to the people smugglers, my electorate was one of the ones that bore the brunt of it. At the peak of the boat arrivals in 2013, there were 5 immigration detention centres within or immediately surrounding my electorate, and you would have heard me, Mr Deputy Speaker, saying that Labor opened more detention beds than hospital beds during its term in government. Labor's complete loss of control over the immigration system had a number of flow-on effects for my electorate. The essential services had to cope with the rapid influx in the population. The ambulance, the police and the fire services felt the strain, as did the Royal Darwin Hospital and the other medical services in my electorate. The tourism industry felt the squeeze, with entire hotels in the CBD booked out by immigration, either to accommodate the asylum seekers. Yes, Mr Speaker, things got so bad that the Immigration Department rented an entire CBD hotel as a makeshift detention centre, or detention centre workers, where there were fewer rooms available for tourists. So even with major construction projects and heavy industry were put out, with the development built to accommodate the fly-in, fly-out workforce snapped up by the immigration. Mr Deputy Speaker, this is why I welcomed Minister Dutton's announcement last month that due to the Coalition Government's success in stopping the boats, the Bladen Point facility would no longer be required by the Australian Government. The Bladen Point facility is the 11th immigration detention facility that the Coalition Government has closed in just over 12 months. The savings to the federal government from this centre closure will be around $18 million in lease costs alone. But despite immigration moving out, the local economy will not suffer, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I'm pleased to advise the House that the facility at Bladen Point will actually revert to its original intended purpose as accommodation for fly-in, fly-out workers on a nearby major construction project. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, you've heard me speak a number of times about Tiger Brennan Drive. When I was campaigning for re-election, I promised the people of Solomon that we would deliver on the duplication of Tiger Brennan Drive. Tiger Brennan Drive is one of the major arterial roads linking my home in Palmerston to the Darwin CBD. And it gave me great pleasure in July last year to stand beside the Deputy Prime Minister and my Northern Territory colleagues at the opening of another stage of the Tiger Brennan duplication. The duplication of the section between Woolner Road and Gonzales Road is easing the congestion and improving safety for traffic arriving to the CBD. And as I stand here today, Mr Deputy Speaker, the $88 million duplication of Tiger Brennan's Woolner Road to Berrima Road section is well underway. Just last Friday, I was joined by my good friend, the Assistant Minister for Infrastructure and Regional Development, Minister Griggs, and also another good friend of mine, the Northern Territory Transport and Infrastructure Minister, Peter Chandler, and we inspected the works which are currently underway despite the wet season. It didn't rain while we were having a look. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, there are many thousands of constituents who commute between Darwin and Palmerston every day along the road will already be seeing construction of safety barriers and heavy equipment moving into place, as well as the specialised machinery building up the roads in low-lying areas to protect against storm surge. When these are completed, these works will give us give 22,000 vehicles who use the road each day easier access between, as I said, Darwin CBD and the Palmerston and rural area. It will reduce traffic on the parallel Stuart Highway and will ease congestion of traffic between the East Arm Port and the Darwin industrial areas. And that's what this government is all about, Mr Deputy Speaker. We're about delivering on our promises, delivering infrastructure. Tiger Brennan Drive alone represents $103 million commitment. The coalition government promised that we would deliver the roads of the 21st century, that we would be an infrastructure government. And I'm very pleased to report that in Solomon we're doing exactly that. Mr Deputy Speaker, it's not just about constructing world-class infrastructure that the coalition government is making life easier for people in the top end. We're also doing our very best to drive down the cost of petrol. Darwin and Palmerston motorists, and indeed actually all Territorians, have been paying far too much for petrol for far too long. At its worst, someone filling up in my electorate would pay probably 30 cents per litre more than a driver in Sydney. That's an extra $18 on every 60-litre tank of fuel. So a forum was convened by the Northern Territory Government, and that had an immediate impact, reducing prices by a few cents a litre, but Territorians are still paying too much. So I was delighted to hear the news last week, Mr Deputy Speaker, that the ACCC is to undertake an unprecedented investigation into the fuel price in Darwin. Under its new powers, the ACCC will break down each element of the supply chain to determine where it's going so badly for Territory motorists and to see what can be done. And I'd like to place on record my thanks to all the Territorians that got involved in the campaign to get the ACCC to actually come to Darwin and investigate. It is a true sign that people power actually works. Mr Deputy Speaker, a fortnight ago I was also delighted to announce that my electorate, that there's a proposal for some work in my electorate for an $18 million Joint Defence Logistics Facility at Darwin's East Arm Wharf, which is currently being investigated by the Public Works Committee, and I'm hoping to have their sign-off very soon. This facility, including barge ramps, staging areas and supporting infrastructure, will give the Navy the ability to operate their new helicopter dock ships and amphibious vessels out of Darwin Harbour. It will also be available to commercial operators such as Darwin or the top end's transport, fishing, oil and gas operations, and also the pearling fleets. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, this is another big win for Darwin and Palmerston. A facility on this scale will mean jobs in the construction phase, ongoing civilian and military jobs to run the facility, and a boost to the industries which will use this area. Another thing that I've talked about many times in this House, Mr Deputy Speaker, is the Palmerston Hospital. Throughout my 2010 election campaign and indeed in my first term in office, I fought hard for the people of Palmerston to get a hospital. The Northern Territory Labor had 11 years in office, and Federal Labor, as we know, had 6 years through the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd era. And in that time, they could have built a hospital. Throughout this time, though, the only progress towards building the Palmerston Hospital was a temporary fence erected around a small bush block on Palmerston's fringe. Hardly something that I would call progress. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, I can tell you that works are well underway now, upgrading infrastructure around a larger site in the area to accommodate a major new full-service hospital at Palmerston. The roads, the intersections, the traffic signals and paths in the area are already in the process of being upgraded, and planning for the hospital itself is well underway. There's room for the hospital to grow, which was always the Country Liberals' plan, to build a hospital that is going to grow with the community. Labor was aiming to under-deliver. It was a box-ticking exercise for them. They were aiming to build a small hospital on a small block with no room for growth in the fastest growing city in Australia. And they couldn't even manage that, Mr Deputy Speaker. As I said, 6 years in federal government and 11 years in territory government, and Labor only managed to deliver a temporary fence around 3 hectares of bush. Thanks for nothing. When complete, Mr Deputy Speaker, the new Palmerston Hospital will be the first facility of its kind built in the Northern Territory for more than 40 years. With Palmerston Regional Hospital, the Coalition is delivering a Level 3 facility, meaning it will offer a 24-hour accident and emergency department, as well as general medicine, surgery, maternity and children's services. The hospital will have a full support service including pathology and pharmaceutical services. The Palmerston Regional Hospital will complement the service already offered by the Royal Darwin Hospital, the Northern Territory's only Level 6 facility. The Northern Territory Health Minister, John Elfrink, along with my Palmerston Territory colleagues, Leah Finocchiaro, who's the member for Drysdale, Peter Chandler, who is the member for the Minister, and Nathan Barrett, who is the member for Blaine, and I are all absolutely united to drive to deliver a new hospital for Palmerston and the greater area. And I know that Minister Elfrink is going to be here this week meeting with our new Federal Health Minister, Minister Lay, and myself to update us on the Palmerston Hospital, because there are some mistruths being spread by those opposite. The Coalition Government is not only I know it's very unusual, Mr Minister, for those opposite to spread mistruths, but in this case they are. The Coalition Government is not only the organisation investing in Northern Australia. Private enterprise is flourishing under this open for business government. New industrial and commercial areas are springing up throughout the top end. Perhaps the best example of this is the beef industry. After Labor's disastrous knee-jerk decision to ban live animal export, the Territory cattle industry was absolutely crippled. Many farmers and agribusinesses were bankrupt, and there were some terrible, terrible stories which I know that you're aware of, Mr Deputy Speaker. However, now just south of Darwin, and the Australian Agricultural Company has invested $90 million in a new beef processing facility, and I was delighted to attend the opening of this facility just a few weeks ago with the Prime Minister. Compare and contrast, Mr Deputy Speaker. Under Labor, an entire industry and a sizeable chunk of the Northern Territory economy is deliberately crippled in one foul swoop. Now, 18 months into a coalition government, we have a diversified industry, live cattle and boxed beef attracting major investment. So what's changed, Mr Deputy Speaker? The government. Under the coalition, stability has returned. Free trade agreements with Korea, Japan and China are opening up economic opportunity for Australian businesses. In the top end, this means our agriculture, mining and service industries now have access to huge markets. The China Free Trade Agreement alone will drop or eliminate tariffs on exported products, including live animals, beef, hides, skins and leather. This agreement will give Australian exporters unprecedented levels of market access to the world's second largest economy, with a population of 1.36 billion and a rapidly growing middle class. And this means greater economic growth, more jobs and higher living standards for those households across the country, but in particularly in Darwin and Palmerston. Free trade agreements will provide a range of new opportunities for our service providers, everything from legal services, financial services, education, tourism, agriculture, architecture, urban planning, transport and many more. So in summary, Mr Deputy Speaker, the people at the top end bore the brunt of Labor's incompetence. It's a great honour to stand here as part of the coalition government to report that things are getting better. Job creation is running 3 times the rate it was under Labor. Job ads growing is currently at 13.6%. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, 585 jobs a day. The Australian Stock Exchange is sitting at its 6-year high. Thousands of pages of unnecessary red tape have been slashed.
Order.
The carbon tax is gone. The mining tax is gone. The boats have stopped.